Emily Carter learned early that survival meant silence. Silence when customers snapped their fingers instead of saying her name. Silence when men stared too long. Silence when managers reminded her, politely, that she was replaceable. This is a journey of kindness mixed with love from people with different world. You're about to hear a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Stay glued, click like, and hit that subscribe button. At 26, she wore exhaustion like a second uniform. The Riverside Lux rose along the Hudson like a promise she'd never been meant to touch. Marble floors. Chandeliers that caught the light and fractured it into gold. Wine glasses polished until they looked invisible. This was where people with power came to feel untouchable. Emily adjusted her apron in the service hallway, staring at her reflection in a steel prep door. Her brown hair was tied back too tight. Dark circles lived permanently under her eyes. She looked older than she was. Double shift again? Another waitress asked in passing. Emily nodded. Rent doesn't wait. That was the truth of her life. Everything urgent, nothing secure. She stepped onto the floor carrying a tray of crystal stemware, moving with careful precision. Every step mattered here. One mistake could cost a job. One wrong word could invite humiliation. She'd learned not to dream beyond the next shift. Across Manhattan, Jonathan Hale stood alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the city like a possession. Lights glittered. Cars pulsed below like blood through veins. From up here, everything looked orderly. Controlled. Jonathan adjusted his tailored jacket, his movements exact, economical. He was 42 and impeccably put together. Sharp jaw, steel gray eyes, a face that had learned how to reveal nothing. Billionaire. Innovator. Disruptor. Words the media loved. None of them described the silence that followed him everywhere. His assistant's voice echoed faintly from his phone. Sir, the board dinner is confirmed. Riverside Lux. 8 sharp. Jonathan exhaled. Another dinner. Another negotiation wrapped in luxury and politeness. He ended the call and poured himself a drink he wouldn't finish. Power had solved every problem except the one he never spoke about, the hollowness that crept in when the noise faded. Back at Riverside Lux, the restaurant manager clapped his hands for attention. We have a VIP reservation tonight, he said, voice low but electric. Jonathan Hale. A ripple moved through the staff. Emily didn't react. The name meant nothing to her. The manager's eyes scanned the room. Emily. You're on his table. Her stomach tightened. Me. You're steady, he said. And don't screw this up. She nodded, even as unease settled in her chest. VIPs were unpredictable. Some wanted silence. Some wanted to be worshipped. All of them wanted control. At precisely 8 o'clock, Jonathan Hale walked in. The shift was immediate. Conversations softened. Chairs straightened. Heads turned, then quickly turned away. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed without asking. Emily felt it, not recognition but pressure. Like the room had tilted slightly toward him. She approached his table with her tray balanced perfectly, her face composed into the neutral smile she'd practiced for years. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Riverside Lux. Jonathan barely glanced up. Water. Still. No ice. The words were clipped. Efficient. Dismissive. Emily nodded and turned, then froze. 2 tables away, a man sat alone, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed not on his phone or plate, but on Jonathan. Emily noticed things most people didn't. It was how she'd learned to stay safe. The man's hand dipped beneath his jacket. Her breath caught. Time slowed, stretching thin and fragile. Emily's heart hammered so loudly she was sure it could be heard over the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. She told herself she was imagining it. That fear had trained her to see danger everywhere. But then she saw it. Metal. Her hands trembled. She returned to Jonathan's table, pulse racing, mind screaming at her to walk away, to get a manager, to let someone else handle it. But her feet didn't move. Sir, she said quietly, leaning closer than protocol allowed. I need you to stay very calm. Jonathan looked up, irritation flashing across his face. Is there a problem? Emily slipped a folded receipt onto the table beneath his hand. Don't move. You're in danger. Jonathan glanced down. Then scoffed. You think this is funny? His voice was cold, sharp enough to cut. Emily swallowed. Please. The man at the other table stood. Chaos erupted. Emily deliberately knocked her tray, glass shattering across the marble floor like a gunshot. The sound ripped through the room. Guess. Chairs scraping. Security surged forward. The man lunged and was tackled. A handgun skidded across the floor, coming to rest inches from Emily's shoe. For a moment, no one breathed. Then sirens. Shouting. The restaurant dissolved into noise. Jonathan remained seated, staring at the receipt still clenched in his fingers. Emily stood frozen, shaking, her knees threatening to give out. Police escorted the man away. Paramedics checked patrons. The manager barked orders through panic. Jonathan finally looked at Emily. Really looked. She wasn't brave in the way movies made bravery look. She was pale. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were wide with the aftermath of fear. But she hadn't run. For the first time in years, Jonathan Hale felt something crack inside him. Gratitude? Shock? Something dangerously close to connection. Emily turned away before he could speak. She disappeared into the service hallway, pressing her back against the wall as the adrenaline crashed. Her vision blurred. She slid down, hugging her knees. She'd survived. But she didn't know that this moment, this single choice, had just entangled her life with his. Nor that neither of them would ever return to who they were before. The night air in Manhattan was sharp, smelling of exhaust and faintly of rain. Emily Carter walked toward the subway entrance, trying to shake the adrenaline, trying to convince herself it was over. But it wasn't over. She felt eyes on her. Always eyes on her. And in the distance, the glint of a man's watch or weapon made her stomach coil like a steel spring. Back at Riverside Lux, Jonathan Hale couldn't shake her image. Not the Emily who had served him water with flawless grace, but the Emily who had seen danger before he even acknowledged it. He was used to control. Used to power. Used to knowing how situations would unfold before they happened. Yet here, for the first time in decades, he felt unmoored. Vulnerable. Alive. He made a decision he rarely made. He would find her. Not because he was a billionaire seeking gratitude, but because she had acted without expectation, without calculation, without fear for herself. That defiance terrified him and drew him in. Emily had made it to the subway station, only to find a shadow lingering near the turnstiles. She ducked behind a column. Heart racing, pulse hammering in her ears. Every instinct screamed to flee. Emily, a low voice called. She spun. Jonathan Hale, perfectly tailored, standing there as if the world itself had conspired to place him exactly where danger would find her. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, voice sharp, protective. "Protecting you," he said simply, eyes scanning. "You didn't run. You didn't hide. And now they know where you are." Emily shook her head, disbelief and panic mixing in her chest. "I don't need protecting. I can handle myself." "You were holding a receipt that said someone was about to..." He stopped, realizing that even saying it aloud made the danger feel more real. "You're in serious danger, Emily." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. For years, she had been invisible. She had survived by being careful, by blending into the background. And now, for the first time, she realized her life wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was being threatened in ways she couldn't predict or control. Jonathan offered her his arm, and against her pride, against every instinct to push him away, she took it. They moved through the city like ghosts, silent, careful, alert. As they reached a quieter street, Jonathan finally spoke. "I know what you did tonight saved lives. Not just mine." Emily's eyes flashed, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Why are you thanking me? I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was right. Because I couldn't not act." Jonathan smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth almost betraying a softness he had hidden for decades. "And that's why I want to help you now. You don't have to do it alone." For a moment, Emily allowed herself to consider the offer. To consider trust. She looked at him, the man who owned skyscrapers and companies worth billions, but she didn't see wealth or power. She saw a man who was terrified and brave at the same time. They spent the next hours in constant motion. Safe houses. Police check-ins. Jonathan's private security monitoring every alley, every surveillance camera. Emily's heart never stopped pounding, yet for the first time in years she felt seen, and that sight was terrifyingly intimate. The danger forced confessions. Emily told him about her mother, the death she'd buried behind double shifts and bitter smiles. How she had worked tirelessly to stay afloat, only to feel invisible even to the people who should have loved her most. Jonathan listened, silent, absorbing every word. He shared pieces of his own walls, the loneliness that wealth could not erase. The absence of anyone who saw him as more than a brand or a number. The night spent staring out windows, wondering if life meant more than contracts and deals. Their vulnerabilities collided. Each revelation cracked the fortress of pride they had built around themselves. Then the first emotional shockwave hit. A call from Emily's old apartment. Someone had broken in. Nothing stolen, but a message left behind, "We know where you are." Emily froze, a cold wave washing over her. Jonathan immediately acted, protective instincts blazing. He pulled her close, shielding her as he contacted security and rerouted their safe locations. For Emily, the shock was twofold. The danger had never left, and the man she had instinctively distrusted, who she thought of as untouchable, was fighting for her life with nothing expected in return. It shattered something inside her. Hours later, exhausted, they finally found a temporary haven in a secluded penthouse Jonathan owned in the Upper East Side. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, hands trembling. Jonathan stood by the window, hands on the glass, eyes scanning the city below. "You're scared," he said, voice low, not a question. "I'm used to it," she replied. "Fear is part of surviving. But tonight it's different. I didn't just feel fear. I felt noticed." Jonathan turned, eyebrows raised. "Noticed?" "Yes," Emily whispered. "Not just seen as a waitress or invisible. Not as someone weak or replaceable. For once, I felt like someone was looking at me and really seeing me." For Jonathan, the word struck a chord. He had never looked at anyone like that before, and the realization made his chest tight. Wealth, power, influence, they meant nothing compared to this raw human connection. But danger wasn't done with them. Late that night, a shadow moved across the penthouse balcony. Security cameras triggered. Jonathan rushed out, Emily following instinctively. The figure was gone, but the message was clear: they were still being hunted. Emily sank to the floor, exhausted, chest heaving. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, voice breaking. Jonathan knelt beside her. "You can. And you won't have to do it alone. I promise." In that moment, amidst fear and adrenaline, something fragile was born. A bond that was not yet love, not yet trust, but an unspoken acknowledgement. They needed each other, whether they liked it or not. And the world outside, the threats, the chaos, was only going to intensify. If your heart just skipped a beat along with Emily, tap like and comment what you would do if you were in her shoes. Don't scroll away. This story will test every limit of courage and trust. The next morning, Emily awoke to sunlight bleeding through the penthouse blinds. The city hummed below, unaware of the chaos and near-death they had survived. But Emily did not feel safe. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she didn't want to drink. Her mind raced, replaying every detail from the night before. The gun, the shadow, Jonathan's piercing gray eyes. Fear and awe twisted together, making her stomach sick. She had faced danger before, but never with someone she didn't trust completely. And she didn't trust him, not fully. Jonathan, meanwhile, was already in the living room, phone in hand, orchestrating security measures, contacting private investigators, rerouting any leads he could find. "Good morning," he said, voice calm, almost too calm. "Sleep okay?" Emily's lips pressed into a tight line. "Do you think I slept?" Jonathan's lips twitched. Fair enough. They both knew what remained unsaid. This danger wasn't over. It wasn't even close. For days, They existed in a fragile rhythm. Jonathan insisted she stay in his penthouse for safety. Emily bristled at the idea of being coddled, controlled, or treated like someone who couldn't manage her own life. She was not a damsel. Yet, the city outside was not forgiving. Every shadow, every honk of a taxi, made her heart race. Jonathan watched her carefully. Every small flinch. Every defensive posture. Every time her hand trembled while reaching for a cup of tea. It wasn't fear alone he saw, it was courage that had been forged in fire. And he admired it, though he didn't dare admit it aloud. Emily, stubborn as ever, insisted on leaving the penthouse to retrieve some personal belongings. Jonathan followed, not because he didn't trust her, but because he couldn't risk losing her again. As they stepped into the lobby, Emily's pride sparked. "I don't need a bodyguard," she said, voice low but sharp. Jonathan nodded. "I know. But I also know when someone is targeting you, and I can't ignore it." They walked side by side, tension between them palpable. Silence stretched. And then she snapped. "You don't understand. You've never had to live afraid every day. Every glance could mean trouble. Every mistake could cost more than money. You have no idea what that feels like." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "I understand more than you think. I've spent my life avoiding people, avoiding vulnerability. Fear has been my constant companion. You think I'm immune because I have money? I'm not. I just hide it better." Emily's eyes searched his. No walls this time. No masks. But neither could fully admit what they felt. Pride and stubbornness fought with the unspoken acknowledgement that they were becoming inextricably connected. Days passed. External threats escalated. Jonathan's security intercepted minor surveillance breaches. Someone had been watching Emily long before the gun incident. Whoever they were, they hadn't given up. Emily's instinct was to fight alone. Jonathan's instinct was to protect her at all costs. And in the middle, tension simmered. "You can't keep me locked up here," Emily said one evening, standing in the penthouse kitchen. "I can't live like a prisoner, even if it keeps me alive." Jonathan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not keeping you prisoner. I'm keeping you safe. That's different." Her laugh was bitter. "You call me prisoner. You call yourself protector. Either way, it's suffocating." "Then tell me what you want," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "I want to live," she whispered. "And I want to choose it for myself." Their arguments became a strange rhythm, blending friction with care. Emily pushed back because she had to, because control had always been hers to cling to. Jonathan pushed forward because he had to, because fear for her life was stronger than his pride. And yet, amid the tension, they could not escape each other. A misstep outside led to another encounter with danger. A minor chase. Shadows that reminded them the threat was real. Emily froze at the sight of a figure following them down a side street. Jonathan's hand found hers, gripping tightly. Emily's instinct was to pull away. But she didn't. Something deeper, something raw and undeniable, held her there. "You're crazy," she said breathlessly. "I'm alive," he replied simply. And in that simple exchange, their world shifted. Later that night, they sat across from each other in the penthouse, silence stretching like a taut rope. Emily's chest heaved. "Why are you doing this? Protecting me?" Jonathan's gaze softened. "Because I see you. I see your courage, your heart, your pain. And I can't ignore it. Not anymore." She wanted to reject him, to run, to reassert the walls she had spent her life building. But every muscle in her body betrayed her. She wanted to stay, to let someone finally see her. But fear always lurked. And fear is a stubborn companion. And then circumstance forced them together in ways neither expected. A call came from one of Jonathan's contacts. The threat wasn't just personal anymore. Someone had plans that could jeopardize Emily's life in ways they couldn't prevent from a distance. They had to leave Manhattan temporarily. Emily refused at first. "I'm not leaving my life behind." "You don't have a choice," Jonathan said, firm but gentle. "Not if you want to live." For the first time, Emily realized that resistance would cost her more than pride. It would cost her survival. She swallowed her stubbornness. They left together, forced proximity, forced trust, forced intimacy in ways neither expected. And as the city lights receded behind them, Emily finally whispered something she had never said aloud. "I think I need you." Jonathan's hand brushed hers. He didn't answer immediately. Words felt insufficient. But the touch, the acknowledgement, spoke louder than any declaration. They were no longer just protector and protected. They were partners in survival. And the rising tension, the unresolved emotions, the external dangers, the collision of pride and vulnerability had only just begun. The stakes are rising, and their emotions are tangled in ways they can't control. Tap like and subscribe to follow this epic story. Every limit of trust and courage will be tested. The safe house Jonathan arranged was isolated, far from the bustling streets of Manhattan. It was a penthouse with walls as white as snow, windows stretching wide enough to swallow the city skyline. It was sterile, luxurious, and silent, too silent. Emily hated it. Her instinct screamed at her to escape, to move, to keep control. Yet she could not ignore that Jonathan's presence beside her, his constant, quiet vigilance, had become a tether she hadn't realized she needed. For the first days, they existed in tense coordination. Every meal was silent. Every movement choreographed. Every phone call a calculated risk. And yet, the enforced proximity forced moments they could not avoid. One evening, rain fell like silver knives against the windows. Emily sat at the dining table, staring at her hands. Jonathan leaned against the counter, sipping a glass of water, watching her with an intensity she couldn't read. "You're thinking too much," he said finally. Emily snapped her head up. "Am I?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. "I think more than you realize. I always have." He pushed off the counter, walking toward her slowly. "I know. And that's why I'm not just going to sit here while you risk yourself unnecessarily." She wanted to argue. She wanted to assert control. But the words stuck in her throat. Because underneath the fear, underneath the stubborn pride, there was a flicker of relief, comfort even, that someone cared enough to stay. Jonathan sat across from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. The air between them thrummed with tension, electric and impossible to ignore. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Emily whispered, almost to herself, "I don't know if I can trust anyone." Jonathan's gaze softened. "You can trust me. You don't have to do this alone. Not anymore." Her chest tightened. Vulnerability was terrifying. Admitting dependence was terrifying. But staying silent in the face of connection had proven lonelier than any danger outside. They began to share small vulnerabilities, tiny, dangerous admissions. Emily told him about the nights she stayed awake, haunted by her mother's death, the bills piling up, the feeling that no one in her life truly saw her. Jonathan listened without judgment, his expression unreadable, but his eyes never left hers. Jonathan told her about the loneliness that came with power, how wealth built walls around him, how every relationship felt transactional, how fear had forced him to hide who he really was. In those confessions, their walls cracked. Not completely. Not yet. But enough that they could glimpse each other's humanity, raw and unfiltered. Then a touch. Accidental at first. Emily reached for a glass, and their hands brushed. The contact lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. Jonathan cleared his throat. "We should not do that," he said, though his eyes betrayed the truth. He wanted to do exactly that. Emily pulled her hand back, cheeks flushed, and muttered, "We're already too close." But even as she said it, she could not deny the truth. They were close. Forced proximity had created intimacy that no one outside their walls could understand. They were mirrors of each other's fear, courage, and need. Days bled into nights. Every moment together sharpened the tension, both external and internal. Then came the first real test. A call from Jonathan's security team. Someone had tracked them, tried to breach the perimeter. Nothing had succeeded, but the message was clear. They were not safe. Emily froze, feeling a cold, creeping dread. They'll never stop, will they? Jonathan reached for her hand, this time not accidental. We'll survive, he said. Together. Her breath hitched. That simple statement carried more weight than words could hold. It was trust, it was commitment, it was acknowledgement of their reliance on each other. Night fell, and the city beyond the window was just a blur of lights. They sat together on the sofa, feet tucked beneath them. Emily finally allowed herself to speak without pretense. "I've spent so long pretending I'm okay, pretending I don't need anyone. I'm tired of pretending," she admitted. Jonathan leaned closer. "Then don't. Not here. Not with me." The tension softened, edges melting into fragile warmth. For a brief, luminous moment, they were not billionaire and waitress. They were not protector and protected. They were simply two human beings acknowledging their need for each other. Emily felt her chest loosen. She wanted to speak. She wanted to reach out. But fear was always nearby. And then she overheard Jonathan's call later that night, meant to be private. He was discussing leaving the city temporarily, moving her to another location to guarantee safety. Her heart shattered quietly. The thought of being relocated, controlled, separated, even for her safety, felt like betrayal. The next morning, the air between them was thick. Emily avoided his gaze, her pride warring with the relief she felt simply being near him. Jonathan noticed immediately but did not push, understanding her need to process. Finally, she spoke, voice low, "You were going to move me, without telling me." Jonathan's expression was unreadable. "I was trying to protect you. I don't need protecting. I need to be seen. To be trusted." Emily's words burst out, sharp, jagged, revealing every ounce of frustration, fear, and longing she had kept inside for years. Jonathan's eyes softened. "And I see you. All of you. I just didn't know how to do it right. Not without risking you." She froze, realizing the truth in his words. Not perfect but honest. Vulnerable in a way she had never allowed anyone to be with her. In that moment the bond solidified. Fragile, uncertain, but undeniable. They were tethered no longer by fear alone, but by the awareness that they could not walk away from each other, even if the world tried to force it. And yet, looming heartbreak hung at the edge of every touch, every word, every shared silence. Danger still existed. Pride still lingered. Fear still whispered. Emily knew deep down that this fragile connection, so new, so raw, could break at any moment. But for now, in the quiet of the safe house, amid tension and terror, they were together. And that was enough. If you felt the tension, the fragile bond, and the sparks between them, tap like and comment. Should Emily trust Jonathan completely? The storm hit Manhattan with sudden fury, rain lashing the windows like a warning. The city lights blurred into streams of gold and silver, reflecting the chaos outside and the turmoil inside the safe house. Emily Carter sat on the edge of the sofa, knees pulled to her chest. Her heart raced, but not from fear alone. Anger, pride, frustration, and longing tangled inside her like a storm of their own. Jonathan Hale paced by the window, phone in hand, security contacts updating him in real time. But tonight he felt powerless in a way money could not fix. Every protocol, every guard, every contingency plan mattered nothing when Emily's life hung by threads he could not see, could not touch, could not control. The crisis arrived suddenly. A black SUV barreled down the empty street below. Two men, masked, weapons glinting, moving with precision. They had found them. Emily froze. Panic spiked in her chest, sharper than anything she had felt before. Jonathan moved instantly, positioning himself between her and the door. "Stay down," he ordered, voice low, urgent. "I'm not hiding," Emily shouted, standing, fists clenched. Fear had transformed into something fierce, rage, courage, and defiance intertwined. Jonathan grabbed her by the shoulders. "You can't fight this alone." Her eyes met his, gray meeting brown, steel meeting resolve, and in that instant, the barrier between them cracked entirely. She realized she wasn't meant to survive alone, not tonight, not ever. The men breached the street-level lobby. Jonathan's security response was instant, gunfire echoed, alarms blared, chaos unfolded. Emily ducked instinctively, but her eyes stayed on Jonathan. Every move he made was precise, fearless, but his gaze never left her. And in that gaze, Emily saw something that terrified and exhilarated her, vulnerability disguised as control. A masked man burst into the stairwell. Emily screamed, instinct pulling her forward. Without thinking, she tackled him, twisting her body with every ounce of strength she didn't know she had. Jonathan reached her instantly, pulling her to safety. "You're reckless," he shouted, but his eyes were wide with awe. She had just saved both their lives. And in that instant, Emily realized the truth she had been avoiding. Bravery wasn't about hiding fear. It was about standing in it, fighting with heart, even if survival wasn't guaranteed. Hours later, the storm cleared, leaving a city glistening in the aftermath. Emily and Jonathan sat together on the penthouse floor, bruised, soaked, exhausted. Silence stretched between them, heavy with what neither wanted to say aloud. Finally, Emily spoke. "I should have never let you care this much. I should have handled it alone." Jonathan shook his head. "You shouldn't have to do anything alone. Not anymore. Not ever." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Vulnerability, raw and unpolished, broke through her walls. She wanted to run, but she stayed. Because she finally understood. This man, this billionaire, this stranger who had stepped into her chaos, saw her fully. And she could not deny the impact it had on her heart. The emotional low point came not from danger, but from betrayal. A call from Jonathan's private office. The men who had threatened them were connected to one of Jonathan's past business deals. A deal Emily had inadvertently exposed during her first heroic act. Her knowledge, her courage, had put them in even greater danger. Emily's stomach twisted. This is my fault?" Jonathan took her hands in his, firm but gentle. "No. It's a result of circumstances. But, yes, your actions, your bravery, made a difference. They made you a target. But that doesn't mean I'm letting go of you." She pulled away, pride and fear warring. "I can't be protected. I can't live like that. I can't be a problem for anyone, not even you." Jonathan's voice softened, tinged with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. "Emily, you're not a problem. You're the reason I'm alive in more ways than one. You've shown me courage, kindness, and the humanity I forgot existed. That's not a problem. That's everything." Her chest tightened. Pride, fear, relief, they all collided. The confrontation came quietly, almost tenderly. They stood across from each other, rain dripping from Emily's coat. She had insisted on leaving the penthouse to check on a minor threat alone. Defiance and instinct intertwined. Jonathan had followed, naturally, inevitably. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, voice trembling. "I want to, but—" "You already do," he said softly. "Look at me." Her eyes searched his, reading every flicker of emotion, every truth in the lines of his face. And finally she let herself believe. Not completely. Not blindly. But enough to step forward. They embraced, not perfectly, not without fear, but fully, as two human beings finally acknowledging the need for each other's presence, courage, and love. Jonathan's hand brushed her cheek. "I see you, Emily. Not the waitress. Not the survivor. You." Tears fell freely. "I see you too. Not the billionaire. Not the legend. You." For the first time, pride and fear did not dictate their actions. Vulnerability did. Trust did. And the emotional walls they had built over decades crumbled, piece by piece. The aftermath echoed the opening night's chaos. Police arrested the remaining assailants, and the city slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But Emily and Jonathan were forever changed. Jonathan offered her a choice: return to her life, independent and free, or stay by his side in a new partnership of trust and love. Emily paused. She thought of the years of invisibility, of fear, of silent endurance. She thought of the nights she had fought alone and the moments she had allowed herself to be seen. Finally she smiled, a small, powerful, radiant smile. "I choose us." Jonathan exhaled, relief and awe mingling in his expression. "Us," he repeated. They didn't live perfectly. There would be challenges, fears, and dangers in the world outside. But they had discovered something far more potent than wealth, fear, or pride. Human connection born from courage and kindness. And in that final, quiet moment, the story came full circle. The receipt Emily had slipped to Jonathan on their first night, the catalyst of chaos, courage, and collision, was folded neatly on the table. It was no longer just a warning. It was a symbol of bravery, trust, and the beginning of a bond neither money nor danger could sever. If this story moved you, if Emily and Jonathan's courage and love touched your heart, tap like, comment how it made you feel, and subscribe for more stories that will stay with you long after they end. Don't forget, the full journey is always worth witnessing.